Okay, we are recording and we're starting. Welcome to our Empathy Cafe. I'm Edwin Rutch from the XR Empathy Circle work group. And this is our 10-week Empathy Cafe series. Every Saturday we're meeting to doing empathy circles to discuss and explore one of the 10 XR principles. And we will have just sort of ongoing dialogue about the meaning and application of these principles. Last week was our first one, and today we are doing principle 2, which is we set our mission on what is necessary. So thanks for taking part in this. Looking forward to our discussions. And just to give you a little bit of an outline of what we're going to be doing, we're going to go for 2.5 hours. And we're going to start off with a presentation of up to 10 minutes about the principles. We have two of the XR co-founders and someone from the Values Guardian Circle. And then we're going to have a short introduction on how to take part in an empathy circle. And there's also a link in the chat window with a PDF. You can always print that out too if you need a little bit of extra guidance. You can just have that open and printed as well. And then we'll go into the breakout circles, which will probably go for about at least an hour and a half till the top of the hour, or the 2-hour mark. And then we're going to come back into the full group, and we'll do a couple rounds of just feedback, sharing back just kind of what the insights and sort of the highlights of what you discussed in your groups. So with that, we're ready for, we start with a quick go around of just everybody say your name, very quickly, your name, the location, and the XR group that you're part of. So Bill, could you just call on people and I'll model it. I'm Edwin Rutch from XR Empathy Circle work group, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. April, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm April. I'm from the XR UK Guardianship and Visioning Circle, and I'm currently in sunny Scotland.
Good, welcome. Stefan.
Stefan Linden. I am from Shoreham by Sea in West Sussex, UK. I'm not in, this isn't the Golden Gate Bridge.
Okay, thank you. Michael? You're muted, Michael.
Okay, yeah, I'm Michael. I'm from XR Cornwall, and that's in Britain. Yeah.
Thank you. Marguerite? You're muted.
Hi, I'm Marguerite. I'm in XR Stroud in Gloucestershire in England.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Lynn? Lynn, can you hear me? You're muted. There's one more clip. There you go.
Yeah. I've got the, yeah, I'm Lynn Rose from Portsoy, Aberdeenshire, Scotland. I'm in XR Aberdeenshire, and there's a more local group at XR Elgin.
Great. Thanks and welcome. Lan?
Hi, I'm Lal from XR Sweden, and I'm part of XR Sweden Regenerative Culture.
Great. Welcome. Claire?
Hi everyone, my name's Clare and I'm from XR UK. I'm currently in the media and messaging team.
Great, welcome. Carolina?
Hello, my name is Carolina, you can call me Karo. I'm calling from Poland, local XR group, global support, and empathy circle team.
Thanks. Marta?
Hi, I'm Marta, originally from Portugal, living in Cork, Ireland, part of XR locally and the guardianship as well.
Great, welcome. MJ?
I'm MJ from XR Amsterdam, Action and Logistics.
Okay, thank you and welcome. Dan?
I'm Dan Feldman. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I'm part of XR Community Democracy, Community Transformers, the XR Technology team, the XR internationalization team, and a little bit in XR Denver, but not really. Mainly internationally focused and UK focused.
Great, quite a resume. Thanks, welcome, Dan. James.
I'm James. I'm in Syracuse, New York, part of Everyone Shut Up. And that's a group that I run.
Thanks, James.
It's a joke, thanks.
That's okay. That was James Green. Now James Moore.
I'll be Jim then. I'm Jim, XR Islington, Regenerative Cultures.
Great, thanks, welcome. Katie.
Oh, hi, I'm Katie. I'm from XR Tewkesbury, which is in Gloucestershire. And XR Regen is my thing, really.
Great,
Thank you.
welcome. Sure. Etienne.
Hi, I'm Etienne. Excuse me. I live in Nottingham, part of XR Nottingham, and also work in the Midlands as well.
Great, welcome. Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm in sunny Gloucestershire. I'm not associated with any particular XR group, but I'm here because of April.
Great, welcome. Tamsin.
Hi, yes, I'm Tamsin and I'm in London. I'm actually also not associated with a particular group. I'm here because of Anne, who's also on here.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
Sure. Patrick. Patrick, can you hear us? Ah, there you go.
Yeah, can you hear you?
Yes, we
yeah,
can hear you.
Patrick. Yeah, great. Patrick in Ireland, Culture and Tipperary, XR Ireland Guardianship and kind of local group.
Great, welcome. Anne.
Hi, yeah, I'm Anne and I'm from the Southwest. I'm in Somerset in Minehead.
Great, welcome. Jamie.
Sorry, was still muted. Jamie, XR Ireland, trainings, SOS, political strategy, guardianship now, and at a global SOS and participative democracy.
Great, welcome. Carolyn.
Hello, I'm
Yeah, we can hear
I'm
you.
from sorry. I'm from Shoreham by Sea, which is by Brighton, the south of England. And I'm involved with Action Wellbeing nationally.
Great, welcome. All right. And Jam, it seems that your audio is connecting. Can you hear us? Can you speak? Okay, it says connecting to audio, so we'll kind of try to come back to you if we can. Danielle. There we go.
Morning, everyone. This is Danielle, and I'm joining from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm not associated with XR, but I am a local activist. Thank you.
Okay. Now my screen it's in two screens, so if I miss somebody, please correct me. Julian. Can you hear us, Julian? Yeah.
Yeah, I was checking in. What's
Yeah.
happening?
Okay.
I'm Julian, I'm in Lewis, and I'm happy.
Good. Okay. Carolyn? Carolyn, can you hear us? Okay. AC.
Cool. Hi, how's it going? I'm Alex. I'm in Calgary with XR Calgary. Kind of all over the map for now. But
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. All right. So I think Carolyn doesn't seem to be able to hear us. John is.
Carolina was talking already.
What, did she already? Oh, yes, she did. I'm sorry. Thank you, Carolina. Oh, and there you are, Jam. Can you introduce yourself? Giampiero. My apologies if I mispronounce it. Can you hear us? Okay, I don't know if he can hear us. My name is Bill Filler. I've been working with Edwin on the XR Empathy Circle work group. and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay,
Edwin?
thanks, Bill, and everyone for introducing yourselves. So next, we want to have a 10-minute presentation about this value, which is we set our mission on what is necessary, and it's going to be done by April Griegsong and Clare Farrell. So do you want to take it away, or?
I think Claire was.
Oh,
here
Claire's going to be
present
doing
this.
it? Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
I thought it was going to be a dual thing, but okay, Claire, take it away. It's all yours.
I might benefit from some additions from April, who knows these principles very well. So please feel free, April, to add stuff in if you think I've not said it all. Okay, so I guess I'm glad actually that I'm like talking about this point compared with some of the other ones, which I think they're all kind of quite complex and quite challenging actually, if you want to explain them fully, and particularly in light of the amount of work that's been done in line with them. I guess, you know, the thing has built up over the last year or so. So the main thing, I guess, to say about this, which fits very neatly with some work that I've been doing recently around thinking about messaging, is that we've never really set out to do things that people would deem as clearly possible. And I think from the outset, we've been in the business of doing things which people think are not possible. And it seemed to me at the beginning of this work that with the people in Rising Up before we started XR, that, for example, going to a political party as part of a campaign and declaring policies like the expansion of an airport for a new runway at Heathrow to be a crime against humanity was something which people thought, well, you can't say that, or, you know, why would you say that? How can you describe that policy decision as a crime like that? And this really speaks to the fact that we sort of knew from looking at the situation that we were in socially and culturally that there was this Overton window that needed to be moved. So the idea of what's possible in terms of the discourse really needed to change. And the ideas of what was possible in terms of a response also equally needed to completely change, because it seemed so impossible to imagine that, you know, that a movement could spring to life very, very quickly and find enough unity and enough people power to be able to push for the rapid change that was needed. And in this case, I think being able to offer some solid research and say that we really have an aim to mobilize this 3.5% as the recognized kind of average that gives you the best chance of success, I think has been extremely useful for people to feel that we're sort of we're being led here by some solid research that suggests that might be something that's necessary, and that might be something that we could aim at. And it seems more achievable than not having that sort of specific around the goal. So I think that's been quite important for us to have something to go at. And again, knowing that this is sort of working with working in the sort of realms of giving yourself the best possible statistical sort of likelihood of getting a good result in the face of what we know is very, very catastrophic. And I guess we also sort of felt in line with this that we know one thing that is necessary is refusal. And we also understand that the peaceful, critical, and that's, so I would describe that as necessary, what we've deemed to be necessary. I think we also understand that it's completely necessary that we move ourselves and each other as widely as possible to be driven by our values and by our principles, and that's what these principles help us to do. But it's also what Extinction Rebellion has tried to found its culture around, I guess, is being values led and being focused on your sort of most virtuous part of yourself, to then go through the grief, I guess, and the emotional reality of facing the truth of the times that we're in, and then being able to find through that a collective kind of courage and curiosity and ability to lean into the work of changing the political reality and the social reality that we live in, which we know is taking us to a very dangerous place. So the other thing about wanting to make sure that we're setting our mission around something that is necessary, I think, is also to boldly go out with the sort of shouting things like "tell the truth" and calling for truth now, in a time of I guess fake news and alternative facts and rife misinformation, is I think is also something which is necessary to do, to claim back the possibility of people being able to tell the truth and for people to be able to gather together around the collective truth that we know, in order to, I guess, ignite people's kind of hearts to be able to move towards this very, very challenging work, from the position that we find ourselves in. So in that way, I think from the landscape of where we were before we started Extinction Rebellion, I feel that something has moved. That recognized that something different had to happen. We had to do things in a different way. And for me, that main difference is mass participation, because of course people were already doing lots and lots of courageous, non-violent direct action. And people were testing out civil disobedience, but we weren't seeing it on a mass scale. And for me, that has seemed to be a very big factor in what we've sort of deemed to be necessary, and what XR's managed to, thanks to everybody involved, to be able to set in motion and demonstrate. So I don't know if that's taken me 10 minutes.
Perfect.
It
That's
probably
10
has.
minutes of good timing. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. So thanks so much for that introduction. Next, we're going to do a short, yeah, April, it looks like you had something to add to that quickly. You're muted.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this is one that we could really give some attention to in the light of everything having changed. I mean, I'm assuming everybody has read the principle as it stands in our website, and you know, there's really this was put forward in order to introduce people to a theory of change that was one theory of change. It isn't the theory of change, it is one theory of change that Extinction Rebellion has worked with. And I would, you know, we have to look at some of the expansion of this. We acknowledge that we're in the midst of a massive crisis. We recognize that our job may be less about saving the world, more about trying to develop our resilience as multiple collapses take place. When we started a year ago, we were trying to raise people's awareness that this was happening. And right now, we're in the middle of it. Everything has changed. And for me, I would love to talk about what is necessary in the light of everything changing. For me, it's very different. That's all.
So everybody really think about that last comment there, think about what is necessary. So I do want to get us into those groups as quickly as possible. Thank you, Claire, and thank you, April, for that. And we're going to just show a quick 5-minute video of how to take part in an empathy circle. There is a link to a PDF that you can also download. And let me just share that quickly. Hopefully this is going to work. My computer's acting up a little bit. Video media player, share sound. So this is a circle practice for those that haven't done it. If you've seen this already a bunch of times, you can go into the Google Doc and kind of write some comments in that. So next, let's look at the step-by-step how to take part. An empathy circle starts with 2 to 7
Sorry.
participants. I'm going to pause. Is that, I'm hearing a lot of static on that. Is it working for you or is it just a lot of static?
Very choppy.
Okay, I'm not going to share it because something's going on with my computer. Martha, would you like to explain just the simple basics of how to take part in an empathy circle? Are you up for that, or I can call on someone else?
I think
Okay.
Martha is frozen.
Oh, okay. Carolina, do you want to just do a short intro?
Okay.
Just
Okay.
while I'm going to divide people into rooms.
Typical empathy circle is a group of 4 up to 5 people. And there are 3 roles. There is a speaker, active listener, and silent listener. And first person becomes a speaker and chooses active listener. It will be person to whom a speaker will be talking. Speaker starts talking about whatever is alive for him or on particular topic, and do pauses to give active listener opportunity to reflect back what he or she just said. And that's how it's going for a lot of time. And when the time is up and a speaker feels heard, he can acknowledge that, saying, I feel fully heard. And we have turn. Now active listener become a speaker, another speaker, and pick up another active listener. And that's how empathy circle is unfolding. Few tips. When you are speaker, you can choose whoever you want to choose for your active listener, but it is good to give chance to everyone, so everyone can participate in empathy circle equally. When you're speaking, as I said, pause. After every thought, every idea you shared with listeners. Give chance to reflect. Make as many pauses as possible to give chance active listener to reflect you as good as it possible. When active listener is reflecting what you just said, observe if you are correctly understood. You can correct, make corrections, you can add, you can express your idea in other words, you can add more details until you feel fully heard. When you are active listener, you can ask for pausing. If you feel that the amount of information is too big for you, you can ask for pausing, raise your hand and ask for pausing. And the most important thing, when you reflecting what you heard from the speaker, refrain from questioning that, judging, analyzing, refrain from diagnosing or advising, commenting in any way. This is the time for speaker to be heard, and role of active listener is to give this space to the speaker. So we put aside our own view. After this time will be our turn and we will be speaking, we will have our chance to share our view. So now we put aside our view and focus only on the ideas and feelings and expression, everything that was said by the speaker. This is 5 minutes for the speaker. So this is the most important thing. Silent listeners, please notice how your focus, how your attention is changing from situation when you are active listener and when you are just silent listener. You observe the process, how we stick to the steps of the process, and observe how the empathy circle is unfolding. I think that's
it.
less...
We have a facilitator in each circle, so the best way is just to learn by doing. So we have in the first, we're going to have 6 breakout rooms. Number 1 is with Martha, and I'll be in that one. Number 2 is Bill. Number 3 is Carolina. Number 4 is Dan Feldman. Number 5 is James. And number 6 will be Ann Jordan will facilitate. So, for those that Bill and Carolina, if you want to do the recording, we'll just have a couple. And James, if you feel like recording, you can do that too. I think we have the record permission. So best thing, we have an hour and a half for the actual empathy circle. So we're going to head into that right now. So. And there'll be 5-minute turns for speaking. So see you there.
Okay. So I've got a timer, and I'll show that once the 5 minutes are up. That means in no way that you have to stop halfway through your sentence. Please do, continue what you're saying, finish that idea. If you're the speaker or if you're reflecting, do reflect to the end of that and have it come to a close, and then we'll carry on. It's just an indication that the 5 minutes are up, but you don't need to stop there and then. So I'll do that bit. And so whoever wants to, maybe I'll be the first listener. Whoever wants to start speaking, I'll listen to you.
I'm happy to be the first speaker.
Thank you, April.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you, Martha. Yep, I mean, I am particularly rooted for me, as I said earlier, in a different part, like the part, the strap line that comes under this principle. Can I just ask Jamie, maybe, I don't know, or to mute anyone who's not listening, who's not talking, to mute, because I get really distracted by other noises going on.
Yeah. Would you mind, Jim? Thank you. Thanks so much.
It's just the that strap line that we mobilize 3.5% of the population. That is actually a theory of change. That's one theory of change, of which there are many, and we have spent lots of time in XR in central groups exploring other theories of change as well. There are others. I like, I at this point, I'm really focused on that second part, the bit, the paragraph that I read out that's about recognizing that we are in the midst, well, at that point that we were right at the beginning of a collapse that we felt was inevitable, we feel was inevitable. And now here we are. Everything has changed. Something has happened that has made, globally, it incredibly relevant to us that our systems cannot protect us, cannot keep us safe, cannot continue to work in the way they have been. To me, they are broken, and that's going to become more and more apparent as certainly in the medical needs. We're realizing that we cannot cope with the number of people. It's just, so there's a whole, that's just one aspect. Come out of this and we're going to see the economic disaster. I'll pause there.
I'll try and see if I got that.
Sorry, Martha.
So you clearly feel very strongly about this principle, and for you it seems that it's not a done deal, that it's a moving and changing thing. And so you're focusing on the second part of it, which is that there's this dynamic of change that has been happening, and it was sort of speaking about it's going to happen, and now it's happening, and we're in it. And so it's, so you were speaking to what is it that this change is, and also that there was, that this is about one theory of change, but that there's various multiple theories of change that have been up for discussion.
Thank you, Marta. And also, I guess that, I mean, if we're talking about that XR wanted to mobilize 3.5% of the population towards, later on it talks about building resilience. You know, there are more than 3.5 of the population right now mobilizing towards building resilience on a grassroots level, looking after their communities, finding ways to weave themselves into how do we, right at a grassroots level, look after the people most at risk in our community. At the moment, that might mean medical needs, and it will be other evolving needs as time goes on.
So you're thinking, what does this mean? These 3.5%, you know, and at the moment, there's more than 3.5% of people that are already mobilized. It might be a different thing, you know, but it's still grassroots people mobilized for a very urgent need. And at the moment, it might be a medical need, but that energy and that action for the community is there at the moment.
Absolutely, yes. And some of the conversations I've been rooted in with people around the future democracy and the community transformers somebody spoke of earlier, you know, these, for me, this is what is necessary now, is to root ourselves into, not to have the idea that we're going to be the people that are mobilizing 3.5 of the population. That's happened. Now we root ourselves into the neededness, the needs that are arising, and we seed the conversations that need to happen about what aspects of the changes that we have taken on in our lives, what aspects of those need to continue for us to have any kind of a future or future generations on this planet. Thank you.
So it's really, the 3.5 is happening already, right? That was a goal, that's happening. It's there, it's on the streets. But the question is, what's our role in the midst of that? And you're saying it's very much to weave into it and be of service from within it. And as part of that, also bring up the conversations that need to happen about what world we'd like to have and that we need to have and the changes that need to happen. But that's where your conversations have been recently. It's really about what is it that we're doing while in the places where we are in the midst of these 3%, there's no need for us to create it. It's already there. What are we doing? Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Marta.
Jamie, will you listen to me, please? So, yeah, I mean, that's the principles right there. Oh, there he is, Adrian. That's it, right? It's like the principles, the intention behind them is set in stone. What they actually mean over time to us might change. And also now that it's not a UK movement, but a global movement, there'll also be the layers of cultural differences and class differences that will mean that these principles mean different things to different people.
So yeah, you're recognizing that like the both staticness and fluidity of them, in that like the intention doesn't change, but you know how we feel about them does change, and recognizing that in the global context, that can kind of drive that change of, you know, how we perceive the principles.
Yeah.
And this principle.
And this one in particular, I think it's always been, you know, when I've done inductions, like in my local group or whatever, when we came up with it, it's always this thing of like, what do you mean? And it's always hard to not go into that discussion. You know, my invitation has always been to tell people, you know, for me it means this, for this other person it means that, for that other person it means something else, and over time you'll figure out what it means to you. But you don't need now this first meeting where you just arrived to have it figured out what it means, as if though it's like this absolute object. It's not a solid object, and like give it time and it'll make sense, sort of thing.
Yeah, so what I'm kind of understanding from you is like your kind of hesitancy to sort of like hand down your impression of this principle from up on high to like kind of newer people, and like try and encourage them to like find their own journey to like understanding what, you know, what they understand from this principle.
Yeah, especially because if I try to say it's this or the other, like very often it gives people an excuse to go, this is hypocritical. You know, you say you're telling the truth, you're not really in anti-capitalism, and you know, I don't know, and oppression and all these other really important things. But this principle is not, it can't try and answer everything. It all it's, you know, for what I care, all it's saying is that we've got a massive task ahead, and we ought to not be scared by the size of the task, and just, you know, just we know what needs to happen. As April was saying, is we need to have a world for future generations. Like that's not non-negotiable. And how we're going to get there is going to change over time. But just because it's hard and I don't have all the answers doesn't mean I got the excuse to say, oh, it's incomplete, whatever this theory of change is, and so I shouldn't get going with it.
Yeah, so if I've got this right, it's like you're recognizing kind of like a simplicity in it, in the principle that like, you know, can give this kind of like recognizing the like size of the task at hand, but like knowing that like we don't necessarily have all the answers, and that you seem to be saying to me to be that to try and, you know, have all the answers in that way and try and push people towards that would just be a mistake, and, you know, would cause them to like react against maybe like specifics that you might bring to try and like assist with like this, you know, laying it all out for them basically.
Yeah, especially because you know, I could try and explain a lot to them with my head, but I really think this change is something that we need to embody, to actually, you know, be the difficult person, the bold person, you know, I think we need to be it. So there's no point in me trying with my mind to intellectualize with them about it. You know, that was my time. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, so you're kind of recognizing the need to like really like embody this principle and kind of like feel it, I guess, instead of trying to like, you know, explain it like cerebrally. And so yeah, so I guess you're connecting that, if I'm right, with like kind of your, you know, unwillingness to kind of like, you know, give people the answers on day one, because it would just not be enough.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's very hard. Your turn to
Thank you.
speak on this.
Do we have Claire in that?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just,
Oh,
my
hey.
internet connection was being really bad, so I've turned the camera off so that I get better sound.
Oh, cool. And how is can you hear us?
Yeah, all good.
Great. Would you listen to me, please? Reflect.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, so I suppose for me, this principle is quite important in ways that like other principles aren't, because I feel like for me, this kind of gives me direction when um, when I struggle in some ways, more than sort of like I feel like I'm, you know, the sort of ideas of like regenerative culture and stuff like that are supposed to be like more solid, but like this idea that like we know what we're doing may not be, I suppose to explain better, I should probably say that like the very first time I heard this, I think I heard it said like, we set our mission on what is necessary, not what is possible. And that's kind of still how I understand it. So I guess it's more like, for me, it's more like we say that, you know, there's no use and there's nothing to be gained from considering failure. So we just focus on what is necessary and strive towards that.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm hearing you've described this as kind of different in terms of from the list of principles, that it's important, and it's important that it is different than the rest, and that it's not it's a kind of declaration of us not being bound by what seems reasonable or politically feasible or possible, and that's an invitation, I guess, to go beyond what might look realistic, given that we know something unrealistic needs to take place.
Yeah. So I suppose for me, like the idea of like 3.5% is like it's useful in some contexts, but like I think once you accept the kind of general idea of like, you know, mobilize more people, have a bigger effect, like this kind of, and yeah, into like kind of driving like momentum driven organization. Like I think that like sort of the exact point is kind of immaterial. When I kind of like, because I'm involved in MVA training, and part of that is kind of talking about this, like the Channelworth research and the idea of like 3.5% and stuff like that, and that's kind of part of the section that I do. So I kind of get questioned on it sometimes, and it's kind of not the point for me. Like it's like, yeah, because it's like not necessarily like at that exact point. I think it just kind of illuminates more the like you know, importance of like an inclusive movement and stuff like that, because it's like the idea that like these movements that we look at that surpass 3.5% and then we're successful, like they were always non-violent, and they're always like, and that allowed them to be more inclusive and stuff like that. So I think like taken as a kind of a whole and just like a part of a step in explaining the kind of logic behind this like momentum driven organization is kind of its relevance, not like exactly 3.5%. And like it's just kind of funny sometimes, like when chatting about these ideas like more casually, you know, people will like you like work out 3.5% of populations onto like exact numbers and kind of make jokes based on that. Like we realized that 2% of people in Extinction Rebellion Ireland were named Owen, and we scaled it up to 3.5% of the population of Ireland, and we realized that it would be 3,500 Owens, and we decided that that was probably enough to do a really effective sit-in in the Dáil, our Houses of Parliament. So yeah, just things like that, really.
Thanks for that, Jamie. That's so good. I'm hearing, okay, so if we go back a bit, you just said quite a lot of stuff. So 3.5% is useful, but it's useful for accepting the need for the scale and to reinforce the fact that we should consider using things like momentum-driven organising in order to get to bigger numbers, but it's not important to focus too heavily on the precise figures, particularly your experience from doing MVDA trainings and talking about the Chenoweth research and using that number in order to sort of give people a target or something to work towards. The usefulness, you think, comes partly from the fact that this sort of helps to helps to make clear that inclusivity is going to be necessary to get those kinds of numbers. And you look at the other movements which have done similar, and you find that non-violence helps to make that inclusion more broad. And then you said because of the number that gets bandied around, you've now got these jokes based on 3,500 Owens.
That's fair. So I suppose, like, kind of coming back to like this idea of like set our mission on what is necessary, not what is possible. I suppose that that kind of informs a logic behind sort of like, you know, like what we kind of strive for, like more specific demands maybe. Like if an action is like, you know, wants a particular fossil fuel project to be taken off the table, and like there's things to do with like the law about it, like, you know, that you can't rescind some kind of license, or like all these things that like you can get so bogged down in. And just to like focus on what we have to do, like the fact that, you know, LNG terminals cannot happen in Ireland, or things like that. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear it go off. Yeah, and kind of like keep people kind of focused on the goals of what is necessary.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So put more specifically towards questions of demands, intermediate demands or policies, or looking at infrastructure projects, or different aspects of the sort of present social and political reality. You think that this principle is really useful in keeping us focused.
Thank you very much.
So do I feel like I don't need to go again, but does Edwin want to speak? Or
So Claire, so now you're the speaker, so you pick a listener, which could be Edwin because he's not spoken yet, and then you've got 5 minutes to speak to your listener.
Okay, all right. Hi, is that okay if you listen, Edwin?
Yeah, I just double checked. Is my audio working?
Yeah,
okay.
Can you
Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay, super duper. Okay. Well, I guess for me, thinking about setting our mission on what's necessary is, I agree with April very much that it's something that means it will change with time as we go through the work together. And I think it's the potential for change on this topic has caused a great amount of debate recently in light of the global pandemic that we're living through, and trying to reorientate ourselves within a social context, I guess, which is very, very unlike the one that we lived in only about a month ago. So that's our own taste of rapid social change. And
can I reflect that back
yeah.
so far? So you're agreeing with April that what's necessary changes over time, so you have to be able to adapt. And as an example, it's about the coronavirus. Just within the last month, there's been a big change, and you have had discussions about how to adapt to that new environment with the coronavirus, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Edwin. And I suppose one thing that I've noticed is necessary is for us to try very hard to understand exponentiality, which I think a lot of people in the climate movement think that we understand, but when we live through the context of it, a lot of people, I think, don't really understand. And I think it's possibly because it's extremely hard for human beings to understand that function, because it's so because it creates change so fast. And I guess for me personally, trying to sort of reflect on what I've been saying to people about exponential impacts of climate change, and then my own lived experience of this now. Yeah, I'm not sure what that does to my understanding of what's necessary, but it does something.
Yeah. So you're just thinking about this whole notion of exponential change that, you know, you've sort of been thinking about it in terms of climate change, that there's this, you know, experience of exponential change, but now you're actually living it and seeing what it means. And you're just kind of like, what does this do to my whole, you know, thought process or, yeah, awareness?
Yeah, and I guess it's, if you really believed that that the effects of climate breakdown were exponential, what would you feel was necessary? And I think I thought that I believed that, basically, and I thought it was urgent. And somehow, with this experience in my recent sort of consciousness, that feels like it could help to shift this actually quite considerably.
So there was this sense of the urgency with climate change, that there's this exponential, you know, deterioration, and then now you're actually experiencing that urgency of how it really happens in real life. So you're really seeing the importance of this. I don't know if that was quite it, but
yeah, I guess it set something in sort of movement in terms of my own thoughts that haven't parked up anywhere decisive yet. They're still
okay, so it's just kind of moving things around, but you haven't quite, you know, kind of settled in on sort of the meaning of it and where you kind of park that notion, those ideas or experience.
Yeah, exactly. And also what is necessary in terms of our work with ourselves, I suppose. So that relates really well back to that. And I think, you know, that's why when I did my little thing at the beginning of this session, I did want to speak to the facing up of the sort of grief and the trauma, because I think that's something that, whilst we were able to sort of open that space in our sort of privileged place in the UK, that seemed like a very gentle and human thing to do. And that we did a lot of the, thank you, Marta, that we did a lot of the sort of focus on our feelings and our emotions. And for sure there is, I think the personal work is going to be more needed now, not less. So that's also maybe a shift in the balance of things.
So in the terms of the shift of the balance of what is needed, that, you know, initially there was looking at the grief aspect, and I think I can't remember the other feeling that was there, but that maybe now that aspect of addressing the feelings may be more important than ever. Maybe a shift to that is what's needed.
Thank you, Edwin.
Okay, thanks, Marta. Speak to you.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I feel a little frazzled with, usually Zoom works just, you know, just moves me into it. It just kind of like froze me in limbo somewhere. It was just like connecting and never connected. And I had to like reboot and everything like that. So just dealing with some administration frustration.
Yeah, so it's quite stressful, the whole thing. Usually Zoom works for you, and today it was just keeping you out, and that created added stress, and so you sort of settling for
and
it.
I really want to be in this group, you know, because just really to hear what, I'm sorry I missed what April was saying, because I'm really trying to understand this, you know, what is necessary, sort of this notion, because it's a little unclear to me, but just kind of hearing Clare, I'm starting to get sort of a, you know, a deeper understanding of that idea, that notion or idea or meaning of that principle.
Yeah, so you're also sad that you missed the beginning of April's, and because you're particularly excited to be in this group and listen from what people are sharing and learn from it.
Yeah, and I was glad to hear about the, the importance of the feelings part, and I think that's what the empathy sort of offers. Is empathy is a way of creating a space to dialogue about those feelings as well as meanings too. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you're happy to hear the importance of feelings mentioned, and really for you that's what the empathy cycle method brings. It's dealing with the feelings as well as meaning.
Yeah, and I do know that I've watched a lot of the videos and on the channel for XR, and Roger Hallam always talks about this 3.5%, I guess, change. That was a big thing that he was always talking about. So I just that's when when I saw in the description that was a part of this principle. I kind of thought of him and how he's always going on about that percentage.
Yeah. So when you're looking at information about this principle and you saw that it had the 3.5% reference in it, it maybe made you think of the videos that you've watched where Roger talks about it.
Yeah, and then I also, since I really work on how do we use empathy, really may have a cultural shift to add empathy as a primary social value. So what is for me, it's what is the relationship of what is needed and empathy, So I kind of think about that, and the urgency. And people, we're talking with this hospital that's it's sort of in crisis now, that we've been doing these circles, and they have an urgency of just for the well-being of all the hospital workers. There's an urgency to them being heard and seen and acknowledged, and I think that's where the empathy comes in. Is when there's a crisis, we want to connect with each other and hear each other and connect with each other and share, our feelings, thoughts, experiences for that sense of mutual connection and mutual support.
So you're thinking about where your empathy work fits within, this story and with this principle specifically, because it's very much about creating a culture shift,
mm-hmm.
and empathy and the culture of empathy being part of those values. And there's also the piece about the emergency and urgency, and how empathy can be of service in that. Now, particularly at this moment in time, you're working with empathy circles with hospital staff, and so it's fulfilling their need, bringing empathy to fulfill the need that they have at the moment, and meet the urgency that is emerging there.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you. April, will you listen to me?
Thank you. It would be a pleasure.
Yeah, for me, it brings back as well, what Claire was saying. There's that piece that it was Skeena, Rupert, and the three of them, I won't remember, wrote, about Vision 2020 a while back, and how it had it sort of questioned the whole 3.5%, or it sort of explored what does this mean, and where do we need to go with this, and I understand, that their piece wasn't necessarily mainstream XR. There was the idea that they were, what they were proposing, but I found very relevant the piece of the vulnerability, and the radical inclusivity that came, a bit what you were saying, that XR doesn't need to be a banner carrying thing. It can just infiltrate and be of service in all these corners of society.
Yes, thank you, Marta. I heard that you were reminded of a different piece that was the piece of writing that came from Mark and Skeena and Rupert, and that kind of explored different questions around that 3.5 and that theory of change, you know, one of many theories of change. And I guess that you resonated with some of the pieces that came up in that, particularly around this kind of resilience building.
Yeah, and the vulnerability piece. And it's funny because, you know, like there's that whole conversation about vulnerability, and at the time we had that input, it was very much like, how people, there's this massive vulnerability around you know, the climate and ecological emergency, and people are feeling it in the majority world. We're not feeling it here yet to the great extent. How do we give people a glimpse, people here in the UK and Ireland, how do we give people a glimpse of this vulnerability? How can we make it present? Because we are scared, we're seeing that this is going to go all tits up. But how can we convey that message of vulnerability? And then now this happens, and we go, well, it's not really what, you know, what we wanted, but it's almost like, you know, it does sound a bit like, in a way, your prayer has been answered in the totally wrong way. Yeah.
Yes, and I missed the bit about vulnerability, and that was the bit that really spoke to you, that, you know, how do we communicate that, those of us who can see it, and those who are in the majority world who are already experiencing it, and the distance that has been built up in this culture between seeing that and really feeling that as ours too. And then suddenly this comes along, and not what anybody would have asked for, to really root it in every community, that this is the vulnerability we are talking about. It's here, it's now.
Yeah. And so, as you know, as people are reimagining what does it mean, the mission of what is necessary, I think in this time and in times to come, it's really important to connect, for me, to connect in with the majority world, to see what they think is necessary. And whether that's through empathy circles or whichever, you know, format people want, I don't really have a preference. But at least 50% should be them telling us what is necessary.
Yep, I really heard your reach for the voices of the majority world to be really rooted into what we're listening to, and not just kind of this marginalized sideline, something we're looking at in a distance, but to bring that right in and have that heard in our communities. And maybe empathy is a route to do that. Thank you. Okay. Claire, would you be up for listening?
Yeah, sure, April.
Great. Okay. Right. I've been taking notes because so many, what I love about this is the way that other people's conversation or dialogue kind of inspires thinking in me. So I was really, one of the things that is really rising in me as I sit here listening to telly propaganda, because telly is my mum's best friend, and I'm listening to this, normally not what I would listen to. And yet what I hear is the narrative that everything will get back to normal. Business as usual is coming, just hang on in there. That is really, that's landing on me as one of the biggest dangers that we are that's arising out of this moment, as if it being fueled into people that business as usual will get back. We will get it back. I'll pause there.
Yeah, thanks, April. So you said that you love feeling the inspiration that you get from other people's conversations by sitting in these circles, and that at the moment the sense that's very prominent rising in you is to do with the TV sort of narrative, the propaganda about everything going back to normal and soon, and that's hearing a lot of that because of where you are, and you wouldn't normally hear lots of TV narrative from mainstream TV. You can sense the sort of danger present in that messaging.
Yeah, thank you. And that in that, if I'm feeling into what I think is necessary right now, I think it's something to cut across that narrative, because deep down when I'm talking to people, they know that getting back to business as usual the way it was is not what we really, it's not the route that is going to see us have any generations further down the line. They know it's not going to happen. Something else is coming. And I really would like to look at what is necessary to make that discourse refocus on self-organizing, grassroots democracy, a whole kind of shift in a cultural shift, a cultural, emotional, empathetic shift.
Okay, thanks. And so feeling through what seems to be needed at this time is something that can cut through that narrative about business as usual, and your sense is that you understand, as many people understand, that business as usual is not going to see us create a future which has future generations, and you're really yearning to look to find what's necessary to change this discourse to one more about self-organization and resilience and democracy and empathy.
Thank you, Claire. And I am hearing exactly the same narrative run within the roots, within the center of XR. Back to normal, straight back on the streets. When's the next rebellion? We're just going to do it all again, the same way we've done it, the same centers of power kind of directing something that is a theory of change that evolved in a different time before everything changed.
And you're hearing all the same narratives in the sort of swells and center of XR, that there's people are trying to plan to do the same as we've done in the past, with similar power concentrations and similar actions planned, which were based around a theory of change, which was developed, which was worked around in a time which was different, which was before the time that we're in now.
Okay, that's my time. Thank you. Thanks, Claire. That's great.
Okay. So I'll speak to Jamie, if that's all right, Jamie? Yeah? Okay. Well, so one of the things that we said was necessary, which ties in with your points, April, was the media that needed to change. And we have a media that serves the the interests of an exploitative system, and of the people who are embedded in positions of power within that system are very closely related to the people who are embedded in places of power in the media, and that this is a major sort of territory, I guess, for us to act in, to try and push for rapid positive change.
Yeah, so you see that what is necessary very strongly applies to the media and the change that we need to see in media, because as it stands, they're so closely linked to the sort of like established, like almost like ruling class, and like, you know, have those kind of connections, and like then are affected by like that kind of vested interest.
Yeah, thank you. And also that this financial system that we work within around the world, because we rely on debt to fuel economic growth, is an inherently unsustainable way to manage that sector, and to govern our lives by that is extremely unwise, and that we should aim to change hearts and minds, and hope, and eventually the possibility will then appear of having a significant change in the economic and financial systems with which we're managing our nations and our societies around the world.
Yeah, so I heard that you connected it also to like how our established kind of financial system, because it depends on, you know, debt basically, you know, to sustain itself, it's inherently unsustainable, and you hope that we can help people see that, so that, you know, people can try and strive towards like a model that would be better for us.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess this is also recognizing that within this theory that we were working with from the outset, we weren't only fixed on this 3.5% mobilization. That kind of helps us as you said before, Jamie, to have a target and to sort of inspire people towards momentum driven organizing and other sort of well researched sort of strategies that can help us to build quickly. But also we had this recognition that these three kind of pillars were very important, so the media and the financial system, and also our democracy, and recognizing that our democracy has been highly flawed, or some use the word fake, for a significant amount of time, and that a representative democracy that we have as the one we have in the UK for sure needs to change in order to be able to make better decisions.
So you made reference to these, like this idea of these three pillars, like the media, the democracy, sorry, wait, what was the other one?
The financial system.
Oh yes, sorry, the financial system. So like they kind of form three pillars that need to be kind of tackled, that need to be changed, and like you connected it to the idea of like the like momentum driven organization, and like kind of just like concepts that are you know kind of well understood, that we can kind of drive people to, you know, to make use of them and trying to enact change on those three fronts.
Yeah, thanks. And I suppose one thing that I think is thank you, Marta. I'll just one sentence. One thing that I think is interesting about the way the principles and values are laid out is that this third one is we need a regenerative culture. And I think that is actually part of number 2.
Yeah, so you kind of identified that like the idea that we need a regenerative culture is so closely linked to number 2. You said it's kind of part of it. If I may say, yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks. So Marta, could you reflect back to me?
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, so I suppose one kind of aspect of like the principle for me is that like that this whole idea of like 3.5% and having like a very specific line, like this kind of seems to me to feed into like this like black and white thinking slightly that like we reject a lot of the time. So maybe that's kind of also why I kind of, in my mind anyway, like I parrot 3.5%, but in my mind I reduce the significance of that because of that, I think. And like, you know, in other ways, like we accept every part of everyone and things like that. Like I feel like time and time again we reject that kind of thinking. And the way I see it applying to to kind of what I talked about before about like the significance I see in it and kind of like always just like pushing is that like I don't see black and white thinking as helpful in like, you know, what kind of how hard we should push, because I don't see like any of this what we're trying to do as a win-lose situation. I'm gonna just pause there.
Yeah. So, although you do parrot it, and it serves a purpose, you feel like the 3.5% is just part of that culture of black or white thinking, and very like set, and it doesn't agree, you think, with other things like the including everyone and every part of everyone, and with generally what we need to do. That needs to be more open rather than black and white, and to not, I also had to not really focus too much on the achievable or the what needs to be done is very big, so there's no point in trying to focus too much on the details of what we're saying we're doing. So
Yeah, that's fair. So I kind of just stopped there because I felt like I was going to get into a flow. Like I feel like the reason, like what I said before about like that this principle is kind of quite important to me for like kind of a level of like solace, is like what I mentioned before about like the first time I came across not what is necessary. Like I'm pretty sure that was like attached to like a tweet whereby someone was asked about like the goals of Extinction Rebellion. It might have been specifically like decarbonizing by 2025 as like is the goal in the UK, and like it not being, you know, realistically possible or whatever, and like the person kind of like, you know, didn't get kind of drawn into like the specifics and like responded quite like emotionally and like asked them like why they would ask that question, like what they hope to achieve by trying to like tell someone that like it's just like hopeless because it's like, you know, actually this is just what we have to do. And so for me it feeds into like my idea that like, yeah, this is not like a win-lose situation. When like people often seem to break it down into like, you know, because we can't accept this world that will just be completely fucked and we go extinct, then we have to we strive towards this like perfect world and everything is completely fine. And like I feel like that for me that like feeds into like this kind of like anxiety and like hopelessness that people can feel if they don't feel like that it's possible. And for me, I think that both of those options are impossible. I think that I believe, and other people can disagree, but I believe there's no chance mankind will go extinct in the next 100, 150 years. like, I don't think that every single one of us will be gone, but it's like a sliding scale where like maybe it's like so few less left, you know? Whereas on the other hand, where it's like, I don't think there's any possibility where we just win, we get everything we want, because for it to be like something where it's like, for it to be, you know, winning or whatever, and like nobody, you know, dies of this, like people are already dying. Like it's now the biggest reason for like forced migration. Like if you try and strive towards this perfect ideal, we've already lost. And so this idea that we just push towards what is necessary as much as we can kind of makes it like everything we do has value. Everything we do is mitigation. People I know in Extinction Rebellion, because of their actions, sometimes small, sometimes having bigger effects, there's people that are going to be alive in 50 years because of what they did. We just don't know how many.
Yeah. So, and I had missed it earlier, it's not a win-lose situation is the main piece. That just because you can't achieve it doesn't take any value from having it as a goalpost, as a direction that you're walking towards. And you don't believe it's going to be one or the other, but the intention and the energy needs to be into doing as much as is possible to avert as much harm as possible. And that really needs to be the focus. And so when people focus on decarbonizing by 2025, well, that's impossible, you think that's really not helpful. And it's part of this mentality that is really not going to take us anywhere. It's just really about focusing how can we mitigate and what can be done, and focus on doing as much as possible, rather than, you know, what one or the other, what is the only, what's the reality. It doesn't matter, just work towards it.
Thank you. That's fair.
Claire, will you listen to me, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's quite desperate, really. I think we don't often, like, you know, I don't, because like I can name it grief, and I can name it all these things, right? And I have the emotion that goes with it. But it's in these moments where the emotion goes alongside the thought. You know, it's when everything's aligned. I think that's, for me, the important piece that we're missing. It's not about going and grieving without words in this emotional puddle, even if with others, but it's about grieving while keeping my thinking brain on.
So I'm hearing you describe that it's almost a place that's worthy of despair, but that it feels important to you to go through an understanding of the type of experience that this is, and of the grief, if you can call it grief, which is quite hard to name the thing that it is.
Yeah, because, you know, the intensity of like what Jamie is sharing, and the intensity of shares like this, I think if people, you know, the media and the banks and the politicians and all those people, right? There's this I don't know if I'm making any sense. There's this disconnect between our emotional bodies and the paradoxes that are minds have to consider to be useful in this time and be strategic. And maybe other people are doing it somewhere else, but I've just not experienced much of having spaces where we bring the two together. And I think it's particularly important because, maybe I'll stop there.
So you're recognizing the intensity of these kinds of conversations, and between the media, the banks, and the politicians, and maybe and maybe you're talking about the sort of narratives of those and the behaviours of those have a big disconnect from the reality, and that your sort of sense of your emotional experience of this in sort of tandem with the challenge to your mind of living with the paradoxes that are present.
I left my idea bit halfway. Sorry. So it's two things. It's us in XR needing to have these conversations, or in XR or other groups, you know, I'm not attached to it being, where we feel the emotional depth of the difficulty without, you know, running from it, while at the same time having the strategic thinking. Like it's having both at the same time. So that's one thing. The other thing is me thinking, we've tried the whole banging on them with the stick, like the media and the banks and we need to keep doing more of that. But behind all that, they're also human beings. And there must be some level of intensity that I speak to that they'll actually listen. And I think it's this, for me, I think it's this. I think it's that we're speaking strategically to thoughts that they can hear in words that you know can resonate within their brains, but at the same time with a level and an intensity that will somehow speak to this other part of their brain where they're human and they can hear my pain and they might not agree, but at least they understand that it's bloody important to me.
Okay, cool. So you're feeling the importance of having spaces, whether it's in XR or somewhere else, to have these conversations which include deep emotion and strategic thinking, where they can coexist, and that you're feeling that we've tried banging on at the establishments, as we've mentioned, and we should continue to campaign at them, but to also do another piece of work which engages them as human beings, and thinking particularly that the intensity with which you're feeling this moment and these crises, to be able to get that to speak to the people in those institutions in a way which, even if they don't agree with you about everything, they'll feel your intensity and your emotional experience as humans.
Thank you, Claire. I felt heard.
Okay, do I go now again? Okay. I've never done one of these before, April. So yeah, well, going on then from that, I think
Claire, just pick your listener.
Oh, sorry. I guess I'll try and go round in the circle again. I'll go with Jamie, if that's okay. Yeah, so to continue from where you've just left off, Marta, I think recognizing a need for a spiritual and a sort of heartfelt change has always been something that we collectively recognise as a necessary component in being able to free ourselves from a paradigm of alienation and separation and oppression. And if we want to affect the power systems that are holding this status quo together, which we know is on a collision course with an extremely bad outcome, that there's a need for a very human experience in order for people to be able to face up to what's needed, both for us and for other people who are not in movements.
Yeah, so I hear that you're recognizing like the importance of like sort of this like spiritual and social element in like trying to like affect change in the way that we're trying to. And so I kind of missed the last bit. Could you reiterate the connection to the last bit?
Or just that this affects like us and the way we work ourselves, and also the way that we engage with other people outside. And I guess if I could sort of build on from that, then I think there's an important thing here about culture. And I don't have a religious or spiritual sort of practice, but I am, I guess I'd call myself a sort of part of cultural worlds in terms of being a creative and a designer and stuff, having worked on art projects. And there's a guy called Theodore Zeldin, a writer who I've quoted to some people recently, and he says in this book, The Hidden Pleasures of Life, he says, I think that the powerful people in the world may have been mistaken when they decided to marry management science and to keep art only as a mistress for their spare moments. And he talks about the separation of art and work as being one of the greatest tragedies of the sort of evolution of human culture. And I guess one of the things I see as absolutely necessary is for us to start to change culture and reclaim it away from the word industry. So a lot of the cultural spaces are put, when people talk about them, they say the something industry, the art industry, the fashion industry, the music industry, the entertainment industry. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because the word industry by its nature is about extraction and sort of exploitation of resource. And we've sort of wholeheartedly thrown all of our best human, creative, beautiful work into that paradigm, which I think is pretty disastrous, to say the least.
Yeah, so I think what I kind of didn't quite get in the last section was like the connection you were making really between like, you know, sort of other like people, XR people and kind of other people, and then also the kind of mirrored and like this kind of connection between like the kind of culture and like spirituality, and that like although you're not spiritual yourself, you're not sort of maybe religious yourself, you kind of feel this kind of like, you know, cultural spirituality in it. And that kind of like bringing things together sounds like it's reflected in this like idea of like that art should not be like this thing kept separate from other things, and like, you know, should be like kind of linked, more closely linked. You talked about the writer that you really liked, kind of questioning why, you know, it's sort of just for rich people in private moments and stuff, and then also brought in this idea that like things are thought of in terms of like industries, and that's wrong, or that's not helpful.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, and I suppose in a way then you could like take this you could really take this principle and apply it to a great number of things where we can see that the way that we set our systems up are incompatible with our own well-being, basically. And I suppose in some ways that's like shows this principle to be a very sort of grand invitation, actually. Once you start to sort of see what it makes possible to think, even just to think.
So the term used for the principle is like that it's this grand invitation. Yeah, and that kind of like logic to like strive for, to kind of shoot high, you know, is quite like, you know, inspirational to be applied to like other areas. So.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. April, could you reflect back for me?
Lovely. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, I suppose like this is an area, you know, of the principles where like in that, yeah, that kind of like idea of like that grand invitation, like this is where we like kind of push farthest. Like other principles talk about kind of maybe just as much about like what we don't do as what we should do. And there's something like really good about having that which like is, yeah, is kind of pushing that hard and giving us that kind of like aspiration. And I suppose then it's kind of like it's connected quite strongly in that way to the first principle, this shared vision for change. You know, maybe not like the kind of subtext, the like second part of it where it elaborates on it, but like the two kind of like headline texts go together quite neatly, and it's like this, you know, really like kind of like coming together and striving for something more.
Thank you. I hear a real acknowledgement and kind of getting present in yourself in this discourse to the opportunity, the invitation, the grand kind of scope of this principle. What is necessary, you know, and that raising those questions allows us to step beyond into the kind of the possibilities rather than the what nots too.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting to kind of reframe it in terms of like scale, because it's like practically, let's say some people are locked on blocking the entrance of something, you know, probably they won't stay there till they starve, but they will stay there indefinitely, and something else will have to happen. They will do what is necessary. And then you can like zoom out to this like massive macro scale whereby, you know, certainly the more kind of like politically, the more like socialist ends of XR will say that like, you know, inherently capitalism, you know, is predicated on like extractivism and like things like that, and it's unsustainable. And then kind of look at this model, you know, a completely different economic model, and say, well, this is what is necessary. So on the scale of like, you know, this political change that they hope to bring in like, you know, 4 years or 8 years or whatever, and it's like what is necessary, right down to like how long are we going to stay here today. It kind of infuses what we do with like this ethos. Now, I'm not saying like I completely agree with like their sort of like exact political model for how we should like progress, but like just the fact that it's like within XR, this kind of like it causes the prevalence of this like spirit of like, you know, how long will you stay here? As long as necessary.
I heard you kind of extrapolating that there's the micro view or participatory aspect of where we're actually taking actions that ask us to ask of ourselves what is, you know, how far are we prepared to go, what is necessary, and that there's also a kind of much bigger macro view that when you step back, that there's also the discourse around you know, the participatory democracy and ideas of citizens' assemblies and things, but that's a kind of macro view. But actually the participation in the micro view, the actions taken, are really significant in terms of shifting people's thinking.
Yeah, no, I really like your use of the connection you're like drawing between the two things I said, like the idea of participation. And I suppose then, like, if I change the like emphasis and like this principle, it's like we do what's necessary, like we ourselves, and like it is something that is like emphasizing this like level of participation in a way. Oh, sorry, I've seen the time. Yeah, so I suppose maybe it starts to hint at like this thing what I quite like in XR, where it's like people are like, oh, I have an idea. This is what XR should do, TM. And then other people are like, yeah, do it.
Okay, yeah, and I so yeah, that it really exemplifies that aspect that, you know, it's not all just in the head. We can all have great ideas, but actually, how do we take action and make those come into the world? And that this helps that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's exactly what I meant. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, Marta, I would really love to talk to you. I'm picking up, you know, I really heard Claire when she was talking about, you know, the way our beauty making, our crafting, our art has become this, you know, has been labeled into this industry. And I suggest that we have another industry that has swept our agency away from us, and that is the death industry, that has taken away our agency within grieving, within how we tend to seeing people we love die, how we tend to the actual death transition, and how and even more so, you know, how we die well, how we actually engage with our own death. That there's an industry that has swept in a kind of sanitizing way, oh, you don't have to deal with this, and has taken away any agency that we have, like Jamie was speaking about taking action in these places. Actually, we can take all that away from you. It's too hard, it's too painful. You don't need to engage.
Yeah. So you're saying how Claire was talking about all these different industries, you know, like the arts industries and that she cares about, and you're saying how you're listening to that and you're thinking about the death industry and how that's been taken away, and all the agency that goes with it, and the autonomy to understand it and look at it and make sense of it, and engage with it in, you know, in your time, in your own space, and with your own process, and all that. It's just been removed, and it seems like they're saying it's a favor they're doing this industry, but it really doesn't sit well with you.
Yeah, you know, not just doesn't sit well, I believe that, again, it's one of those roots of disconnect that has been sown into our culture. grieving for me, you know, I liked that you kind of had a definition of kind of the soggy heap, or the, you know, just the tearful crying, and that there needs to have some kind of head engagement with that as well, and intellectual engagement along with that. And I'm really clear that, you know, this is the opportunity, and it sounds awful, but this is the opportunity of these times. People are being broken open by grief, whether it's numbers on a scale that just that exponential, we don't quite understand, but there's getting to be lots of deaths. And I know in my awareness right now, it's come as close as it's friends of friends who are dying. There will be a day very soon where one of my friends will be a person I am naming as transitioning into death. And maybe there'll be more than one. It'll be a friend, or it'll be my mother, or it will be somebody actually connected to me. And then that's that breaking open. There is the well of, you know, of an untraveled, of an unworn path, a path that we are not commonly kind of shepherded down, you know. Yeah, you go do your grief and you get over it and come back as if normal, or there's a path to grief, there's a, you know, there are stages you go through. It's not commonly that we hold each other to do both that soggy bodily weeping and talk about what this means to us. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so it's more than that. It's really that there's this time and space now where it's just very thin, that layer between us and death, and it's coming closer. And, you know, now we know someone that knows someone, but there'll come a time where we actually have someone in our direct experience that is passing from this. And so as it's coming closer, and it's really, you're seeing it as an opportunity to really engage with the experience of what does this mean, and how can we in ourselves integrate the emotion and the experience and the thinking of it, but also how can we do it with each other to be real in these times around it as well.
Thank you. I heard that was my time, and I just want to finish with the transformative power of shared grief. It is as connecting as empathy, and it makes a path for empathy in way above, you know, when somebody's son has died and somebody's mother has died, you're leveled, you have a broken open pathway to connection. And I believe this is where we will transform, along with, you know, the tears, the water, the finite H2O on this planet, transform through our body. It's not just humans we're going to see down. We are going to see down the world around us, whole species of trees, species of animals that we love and look to for, you know, that they think they'll always be there. We are going to see so much down. Grief is key. How we re-engage with it is key to how we build resilience among, right on the ground with each other, grassroots, shared community, responsibility and resilience. Thank you.
So it's really about taking the time now and be real and letting ourselves be broken open together to do this transformation that needs to happen. And it won't just be humans, there'll be more than humans as well. And it's to be very present with that, because it's in grieving together fully and in the presence that we'll actually be able to bond and grow and do something worthwhile.
Thank you.
Thank you, April. I think Edwin will probably call us in soon. So yeah, maybe if before he does, if we just share a couple of words each rather than me having a full share, I think that would feel nicer. Yeah, I'm very appreciative of everything, and I'll be thinking with it, especially this thing about the exponential that Claire was talking about. Like, yeah, going to be thinking about the exponential a bit more. Yeah, what about everyone else? We'll have a yeah.
Yeah, could I sort of say to April, yeah, like what you said about grief really spoke to me, and just that, like, I kind of, for other various reasons, someone passing away a while before, like, I kind of started parts of my journey with XR from a place of grief, and I'm kind of, you've given me kind of some things to think about how that has impacted, like, how open I've been to, like, aspects of XR and, like, the practices, the new practices that I've experienced within it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed everybody's unrolling of their minds.
Yeah, thank you everybody for being my first empathy circle experience. Yeah, it's been really wonderful listening to everyone and learning how expansive this principle is. It's really nice.
So yeah, it's fascinating and very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Alex?
Yeah, so I was in that same group. We talked about conflicts, antagonism, perspectives, and diversity. And I'm just really noting a lot. It was lots to mull over for sure. The thing that stuck out the most was probably antagonism as like, and its connotation traditionally. So thinking about how necessary these confrontations are with the larger system, and how, like, what methods are necessary to resolve them. So a theme that came up was like the local, personal, and close contact, intimate kind of deep listening as a method. So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Alex. Dan?
We had a very interesting conversation. It also played off. Descartes came up as well as Nishitani, who was a Zen Buddhist religious scholar, and a theme about the separation between the heart, mind, and the integration that is kind of needed, and that also that the principle of necessity, what is necessary, brings together wisdom that integrates caring together with relevance, yielding wisdom, and that the principle itself and many of the other principles are resilient in themselves. So as we go through changing circumstances and changing challenges, the principles are resilient and agile.
Great, thank you, Dan. Marta?
Yeah, it was lovely. For me, what I'm taking away is there's this thing that about humans not being ready or not being very good at coping with exponential change. So that's something I'm going to take away to think about. But then also, what is necessary for me? You know, like on a personal scale, what is it that is necessary for me to do that I can't not do? And what is my own system change? What does system change mean for me in my body, in my life? And what do I need to refuse to be consistent with that? You know, and for me, what came up was this refusal. Like, we live in a culture of separation, and maybe for me, it's refusing separation. That's what I'm with. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. MJ?
Yeah, my topics were discussed as well, but already. But I think we appreciated how these values can be durable over time, that having this value on doing what is necessary, it's more durable than setting a fixed goal, so that can see us through what is coming.
Thank you. April?
Thank you. I was just about to go. Yeah, I deeply appreciated this dialogue. It's really helped me. I love the fact that at the end we came down to grief, to the brokenheartedness, to the, you know, the fact that we are all going to be touched by people dying in our midst, and how that we could let that break us open to the necessity that we will have to see down a lot more than people. We are going to see down whole species of animals, species of trees. We are going to see down so much more. That exponential curve in a climate, it's, you know, this is just a taste. So thank you. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, April. Carolina?
We were talking a lot about the present situation, the state of emergency that is happening, not because of climate, but because of not because of climate catastrophe, but because of COVID-19, and what actually the movement can do in such a circumstances, and about all the limitations of the current situation. And I have feeling that we agreed that regenerative culture is very important, and we want to develop it, and this is one of the direction. But there were also ideas what actually we can do, how we can protest, even when in a situation when we can meet in number bigger than 2. Still we can do something. So it was very interesting. I'm glad. I want to thank you, Margaret and James, Jim Moore, for this circle. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Katja?
We talked about a few different things. There's 3 points I want to just bring light to. 3.5% in different parts of the world can be difficult to mobilize depending on which government is in power. But right now, Extinction Rebellion's at a prime position to influence governments to bring in new green laws, and that we are all unique, we're all talented, and we are all inspirational individuals, and we should all be proud of what we've achieved so far. So well done, all of you.
Oh. Thank you, Katja. Marguerite?
I was with Carolina and Jim, and yes, we were building on each other's points. It was a great overall discussion. I really enjoyed it, and I guess we were sort of feeling that there's the regenerative culture is definitely something we can do in this climate, but I still feel that, you know, non-violent direct action maybe is a way to get, but how do we do that? We have to wait until the lockdown's ended. So I guess our biggest opportunity is perhaps working on changing people's minds. But thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite. Lon?
We talked about how to connect to different kinds of groups that we aren't reaching out to right now. And we talked about, you know, working with empathy and like listening as a part of trying to connect with different people. Yeah.
Thank you, Lon. Jamie.
Yeah, so I was also in April's and Marta and Claire's group. So we kind of arrived at that point of the grief, and I suppose through looking at the kind of interpretation of this principle, like the kind of interpretation of this principle as kind of like we would do whatever it takes. What I kind of got from it was like this idea of like in the face of this grief and maybe doubt, that it gives like strength and kind of purpose. Yeah, it was a really good experience.
Thank you, Jamie. Michael?
Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation in our group. Couple of points. Maybe COVID-19 can present an opportunity for XR to tap into the questioning which people are asking about the system. So it might be an opportunity for that. I mean, among this tragedy. And another point was is the model which New Zealand has at the moment. XR is embedded in the New Zealand government, and it's it actually gave such an inspirational portrayal of what XR and government can do. They have a progressive government. Unfortunately, many of us right now, America and Europe, we have right-wing governments in favor of big business, which makes it hard to bring in those policies of the Green New Deal. But just to finish off, you know, when all this is over, you know, going back to Naomi Klein, when all this is over, there's going to be ideas left around, because this is a disaster. It's such an unparalleled disaster, and there's going to be ideas for sure. You've got the ideas of the predatory capitalist, big business, or you got the ideas of the Green New Deal. Now, we have to get real, and we have to develop an exit strategy in which we can force through our ideas of a Green New Deal. If not, then we know it's business as usual.
Thank you, Michael. Lynn?
Yes, I see reality, and consequently, I am somewhat despondent. But on the positive side, what I take away from XR and this group meeting like this, I get a certain amount of comfort from the empathy, and the very fact that we are here and talking gives me a little bit of comfort. Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn. James Moore.
Yeah, but I'm glad I came in on the call. It's sort of like it was a do I or don't I deal today, but yeah, thoroughly enriching experience and lovely to speak with both Caro and Marguerite. We really built on each other's thoughts as the process went on, and I've come out still left with some great questions as a consequence. You know, what next, and about uniting around cause. Some of it was sort of like, well, has a little bit of that change within the current situation, not completely away from the climate emergency, which is ticking and coming our way as relentlessly as it was before, but looking at how we're responding to the change in the current political climate and the tightening up on our civil liberties, and what that means about how we can act as an organisation, on a non-violent direct action point of view within the current climate, and how more questions than answers in some respect. How can we affect change within the current lockdown situation is where I've kind of walked away from. But we talked a lot about embedding, regenerative culture and using that as an experience. And yep, great. Sorry for over talking.
That's so good.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear. I wish I was on your also. I had a great conversation, but I would have liked to hear you and hope to hear you more in the future. James Green.
Yeah, thanks. So we had an interesting discussion about frustration with police, with people not being comfortable with having an antagonistic relationship to the police. And there was, I think, some thought about how, for me at least, that, how can we find a way to have a antagonistic but constructive relationship with police and governments, that by doing it in circles like this where we explore having antagonistic relationship to each other, but that is constructive and bringing up differences, is a way to transition to those kinds of nonviolent direct actions.
Great. Thank you, James. Ben? Oh, Ben did, yeah.
Ben was.
Ben was, I thought, okay. Anne?
Thank you. I've gone a bit dark. Yeah, we had quite a diverse discussion really in our group. I think one of the features was about embodying regenerative cultures and how important that was for system change, kind of partly to deal with conflicts within the movement, but outside, because there is so much of it in our societies and how important that is. And it was inspirational hearing Katia's progress in New Zealand with the government, and the extent of 30% of the New Zealand population is mobilised behind the climate and ecological emergency, which is wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anne. Danielle? I don't know if Danielle's there. I don't know. Okay, Claire. Oh, there's Danielle. Great, and I'm sorry. So Danielle and then Claire, sorry.
Yeah, what I appreciated from the circle was just the modeling and fine-tuning of the listening and reflection, and that, can be a process, but that is what I noticed, and was appreciative of that as a way into this question of what's necessary with everything changing. For me personally, it's also wanting to listen, to what is changing and what's changing for other people, and then being able to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Claire?
Okay, so yeah, we had a really interesting session. I'm sorry I'm not on the screen, because I thought it was probably a bit weird, but my internet just wouldn't stay on very well. So I thought it was better to keep my sound good. So interesting that some other groups discussed exponentiality, because we talked about that and the sort of visceral experience of it, how that's actually seems quite different now through living through something with exponential properties, which is much more rapid kind of onset in terms of the coronavirus pandemic. But we know that we've been talking about that a lot in the past, and somehow that changes things a little bit for us maybe. The sort of business as usual narratives that are around feel heavy and challenging, and like a clear focus needs to go on changing those. And I guess we also had a really interesting point on the sort of micro and the macro of what's necessary. So seeing that sort of need to shift narrative as a necessity, but also knowing that sometimes if you go and take a sort of very small scale direct action, that can also be part of something which seems necessary too, and being able to see it on these different layers or different levels. And towards the end, we also discussed having a kind of the importance of having spaces where we can have conversations that encompass the depth of our emotional experience, with the ability to sort of also use strategic thinking in sort of thinking of quite a wholehearted way through. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for your introduction. Okay, I had a wonderful conversation. I really enjoy being in the circle, and we talked about outreach to more diverse communities, and we also talked about the importance of building an emotional basis, emotional connection, and a communicative bridge between us, and then making that available to the wider populace at large. And people seem to like the empathy circle as one tool to do that. Thanks. Edwin, I'll put it back to you.
Okay. So I was having a little technical problem. Somehow Zoom wouldn't let me into the room. I had to use my laptop to get into one of the rooms finally, and then my Wi-Fi went on my laptop. So I didn't get to express myself fully. And what I had wanted to say was, for me, what is necessary is empathy. You know, it's empathy, mutual empathy, a culture of empathy. And I want to, just appreciate everyone for being here, because you are doing it. You are taking the time and energy to have an empathic dialogue with others. And we have to set, I think that is absolutely necessary. So we are doing what is necessary, in my opinion. And in terms of sort of action strategies around, building an empathic culture, I think it's using this within our action strategies. Sort of demand that the media have empathy circles instead of people going on to the media and playing their game. Is saying, we demand that you have an empathy circle with us. There's critics of XR, for example, the Policy Exchange. I think it's sort of a right-wing, security-based organization that they wrote quite a critical paper on XR, saying that it's like terrorist organization or something like that. And I think that's a perfect opportunity to invite them into an empathy circle. Say, yes, we want to have an empathy circle with you. And if you don't want to have an empathy circle, we're going to park in front of your offices until you talk to us in an empathy circle. And the same thing with leaders, right? It's like just go to the parliament, go to the state capitals here, go to the national capitals of the United States and say, we demand an empathy circle with you and between each other. So we're all here sort of practicing that, and we're kind of scaling up for it. So I do see this is what's necessary for me, and everybody has their own, and that came up in the group that I as well was, there's something different that's necessary for each person. So we have to see what's necessary for each person individually. So with that, I'm going to just stop. So we have a separate clip here. If you feel like we have about 10 minutes, we might go over a little bit, but just to hear your feedback on what was your experience of the empathy circle itself, like doing mutual empathic listening. What are maybe the positive aspects that you got out of that? And we can do another quick round if you're up for calling on people again.
Okay, sure.
And if you need to drop out, understand the time constraint, but would love to hear any sort of feedback. Yeah.
Sure. I'll start with looking at my screen. Katie?
Yes, I think for me, it's what I find most interesting is the transition between listening and then talking, and it makes me very aware of how different those two things are, and that listening is a real skill that I'm learning by doing this, by being in this process. I'm becoming better at it. Therefore, I'm becoming a better communicator.
Great, thank you, Katie. Alex?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with a lot of the sentiments that have been said. I think this is a really valuable practice as far as slowing down just the pace of our cognition. And I think that plays well into the current state of affairs. So I really like that idea also of having, like, demanding that we do this process with people in charge, and just like saying, like, well, yo, like, no, this is how we, like, I'm for it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Marta?
Yeah, it's good. It feels, it's nice meeting new people and having topics that people feel strongly about and have a lot to say, and yeah, picking something up and looking at it from various angles. And for me, as a facilitator, it always feels like a privilege to help make that happen, really.
Okay. Thank you, Marta. MJ?
Yeah, this is my first empathy circle, so I appreciate the system and everyone involved. I think empathy is very integral in all of this, what we face, so it's a very important practice to continue, a skill that is to be trained upon. So thank you all.
Thank you. Katja?
I agree with most of the sentiments that people are saying. I believe this is a very valuable practice. I value the connections that I'm able to make with others. In my opinion, empathy is the most important quality that we can possess as human beings, and it is the most important quality that we can share with others. So we really need to do more in the way of empathy circles and Extinction Rebellion, and it is something we can take out to the wider community, especially now in our time of crisis. People need empathy circles. People need to talk.
Thank you, Katja. Marguerite?
Yes, I think what Katie said I really liked, that you do get a bit more experience the more you do it. And yeah, usually when you talk to people, you're always waiting to put in your bit. So, the opportunity just to listen and reflect back, it's we're not experienced at it. We don't do enough of it. So I think the more we can do it and take it out to the community, the more I think it's a fantastic opportunity. So.
Thank you, Marguerite. Lynn?
Yes, I entirely agree with Katie there. It's so often I'm speaking and trying to get my point across to people and being a bit dogmatic, whereas Katie there is saying about listening, and for the first time, I think in a long time, I've kept my mouth shut and listened to people. And the other thing I'd like to say is, isn't it marvelous that a disparate group of people from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, are getting together? And isn't that a good thing, damn good thing in the first place? That's one thing. And then, to listen to other people's viewpoints and that, it's been, I've done other ones as well, but this has been a good experience. I've learned to keep my mouth shut.
Thanks, Lynn. Ben?
Yeah, it's this is only my second time doing empathy, this type of empathy. I've done lots of active listening practices of various sorts, but this seems like a really useful tool. So it's like it feels like I get to expand my toolbox a little bit and put this one in. And the practice was very useful for me because I really felt that I could say things that I thought people might not like, and yet it felt safe enough to do that. And then it was a kind of, for me, quite astonishing how the connection deepened because of that.
Great.
And to say that probably I have this kind of strong feeling that if we don't do this practice, we probably will fail with all the other stuff that we do.
Thank you, Ben. Anne?
Yeah, again reminded how valuable and important this work is. It feels like it's core to everything we do, and also being reminded the sort of additional value of having like passive listeners as well as the active listener, and how that can increase the safety and the diversity of the dialogue. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne. James Moore.
I just agree with Anne's last point now. It is lovely having the passive listener as well as the active listener, and that definitely does give a sense of safety. I'm really familiar with co-listening circles where there is less feedback, and as a model, I much prefer this one. It's nice to get fed back and to have that opportunity to notice whether what you've been saying has been heard or not by the active listener. So I firmly applaud that. And yeah, for me, a hugely positive experience. And yeah, I can't thank the people that were in my little group enough. And great to see how we built on a common theme, although there were lots of there were some subtle differences, and that's great too. It's important that there are differences. That's me. I'm not going to talk for more than 1 minute.
That's all right. That's okay. You're fine. Thank you. Appreciate that, James. Thank you. Carolina.
I don't feel like I have much to add to all I heard today. Those comments today are very reaching, and I don't see if I could say anything good enough to add. So thank you very much. Maybe I would like to say one thing. I appreciate and see the difference when there is a circle of good listeners. It works differently. If we have a huge capacity, ability to listen and to reflect, the whole circle goes kind of smoothly, and I didn't have to facilitate much. That was great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Carolina. I think, and I think that's it. Katya, Danielle, I think you've reflected. Please correct me. Okay. And Danielle, I don't see you. And
I don't think, did Danielle go?
I didn't go. So. Okay. Danielle? Oh, there you go.
Hey there. Yeah, I had a good reflection, which is because of the back and forth fine tuning, I got to experience whether what I was, sort out what I actually was feeling, you know, because I wasn't necessarily clear. So that exercise was really helpful. And then interestingly enough, afterwards, I felt angry, not at the experience, but I realized that maybe what I had shared wasn't what was really going on for me, or maybe some of the discussion was triggering. I wasn't aware of it until after it was over. And so it did make me kind of, that reflection and opportunity to share did make me reflect a little bit on, you know, what's authentic for me to say. Am I saying what other people want to hear? Am I saying, you know, things to be part of the group? Or so it just kind of, that's what came up for me after our circle closed. Yeah, and that was really valuable. So thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. As always, I agree with the sentiment where we're talking about there are people, you know, all over the world who share our values and who want to listen to each other. And I think that's great. I think that's the basis of what we need to do to be successful in any kind of way. And we talked about, you know, and I really appreciated that we, you know, we explored things. We didn't always agree, but we kind of explored different strategies. And I really was appreciative of that. Thank you. Edwin?
Okay, thanks, Bill. So this practice, you know, to begin with, it takes an hour or two to just to get sort of familiar with it. So in future empathy cafes, it'll be easier for you. You won't have that sort of that learning curve. And it does take practice, 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 just like anything else, that the more you practice, the better you get at it, at the listening as well as, you know, concise perhaps, and speaking. So I put the link in there to our Google Doc if you're wanting to add your contact info. You know, there's an email, you can add your email, or, you know, just write any sort of notes that you might have. And it's also a way to connect with others who were in this call, so you can connect afterwards if you're wanting to. And with this, what you have now, with that, there's resources there on the Facebook event page for the videos of how to do empathy circles, and there's a one-page instructions. So you're ready now to go facilitate one yourself, you know, get some family, friends, just get 2 or 3 others, sit down and say, hey, I'd like to try this empathy circle with you, so you can get some practice. Mm-hmm. And so with that, we'll see you next week. We have principle number 3 that we're doing next week, and looking forward to seeing you. And, you know, bring some friends, invite them to the event, and look forward to, you know, continuing the empathic dialogue with you.
Thank you.